Ready one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac and welcome back to my channel. Today I decided to do some filming outside for a change, so what do you think? My problem is it's late September and it's still too hot and humid for me, so I had to find a little bit of a shady spot or I'd be squinty McGinty. So let's see how it goes. Today I'm doing the A to Z Bookish Tag, and I've actually forgot the precise name for the booktuber whose channel I found it on. Austen, I'm going to put his full name at the bottom, his full channel name, but I did put here that the original tag was created by Perpetual page turner. So here's my take on the A to Z Bookish Survey Tag. This tag has 26 questions, so I'm going to be short and snappy. Number 1. A is for author you've read the most. I would say Jane Austen, I've read most of her books, or Michael Cunningham, I've read 3/4 of his. That was short and snappy. 2, B is the best sequel ever. I don't read sequels. The only one I can think of other than what I'm going to mention for the longest book in a minute, but is one I mentioned on the last tag I did. Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel was an exquisite sequel to Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, and I'm eagerly awaiting the third. Is it really coming? Is it really? C is for currently reading, and I'm reading a whole pile of books, mostly print, but 2 audio. Let me just go through the list. I talked about them last week on Friday Reads, and I'll be talking about them again on Friday Reads tomorrow, but this video may go up on the weekend after Friday Reads, so I'm not sure when. But here's the list. My Absolute Darling by Gabriel Talent. Loving it. The Water Beetles by Michael Kahn. Not sure about it at the moment. The Collected Stories of Mavis Gallant, a year-long reading project. I hope those trees aren't going to... they're blowing my little plastic thingy that I'm clamping the iPad to the bench with, but hopefully the audio's okay. The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki. Hope to maybe finish it this weekend. Profoundly beautiful. In a Country of Men, a novel by Libyan novelist Hisham Matter. So. A book of poetry. This is for a reading challenge I'm doing. It's called The Deleted World by Thomas Tranströmer. And I can't actually remember which Scandinavian country he's from. Sweden, I think. I don't read poetry. I'm enjoying it very much. Audiobook of called The Tragedy of Brady Sims by Ernest Gaines. I talked about it on Friday Reads last week, and still doing the book review. I mean it not in the normal literary sense, but in the sense of reviewing what I've already read for the Chinese novel Soul Mountain by Gao Jingzhan, which I talked about on last week's Friday Read. So that's the list. D for drink of choice while reading. Coffee during the day, alcohol at night, so I don't read too much longer after I've had my first few drinks, but I do enjoy a glass of wine or whatever, or a few glasses of wine while I'm reading at night. E is for ebook or physical book. 50-50. 33. E-book, printed book, audiobook. F is for a fictional character you would probably have dated in high school. I'm not going to get raunchy here, but I'm going to get just a little bit this side of raunchy. I've heard this author's surname pronounced 2 different ways. I've heard it Robert Seathaler, Seathaler. I've also heard it pronounced Robert Seathaler. I like the second one better. I don't think they pronounce the TH in Deutsch the way we do in English, do they? Does anybody know? So I read his A Whole Life last year, and I loved it. And so this year I read another of his novels. I think it's a later novel, The Tobacconist. It's not as good as A Whole Life, but it's really good. I still gave it 5 stars. And it's about a 17-year-old Austrian boy he's a country bumpkin, and his mum sends him into Vienna just before World War II, just before the German invasion. Was it an invasion? Oh my god, anyway, you know what I mean. But to the big city to fend for himself, and he works for a tobacconist. Anyway, he meets this girl. I'm not going to say much about their relationship because it wasn't much of a relationship, but she's an important character in the book, and she's about the same age as he is, and she cannot stop complimenting him on his great butt. Every time she sees him, she fondles it and compliments him on it, including when they do a slow dance at one point in a nightclub. And I just found that there's not very much there isn't enough in literature about callipygians. I'll put that at the bottom. I'll let you look it up. It's one of my favorite words in the language, callipygian, and I just found it lovely. And there's no pictures, unfortunately, but yes, I would have dated this. He's a sweet young boy, very wide-eyed and innocent, and this was a delightful novel. And he had a delightful posterior. I love the ending. G is for glad you gave this book a chance. There's many, but one fairly recent one that I would say is Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, which I read a few months ago. I was just ready. I'd been reading more and more modern African fiction and thought I'd better go back to the granddaddy of the canon, and I loved it. 8. H is for Hidden Gem Book. Here's one I'm dying to tell BookTube about. It's a Scottish novel from about 1991 called O Caledonia by Elspeth Barker. Ali Smith told me about it when we had tea the other day. I mean, you know that by the book weekly automated interview the New York Times book section does with writers? She mentioned that in her little interview a few months ago, and I did a buddy read of it, and I just loved it. I think I might try to prepare a review of it because it's so little known, and it's a gem. Gem is the perfect word. 9. I is for an important moment in your reading life. I would say when I finally coaxed myself out of a years-long book slump at the end of 2015. In that year, 2015, I only read 4 books, and that's just embarrassing for me. But I had just gotten into a real slump, things going on in my personal life and my work life, and I just got away from reading altogether. In 2016, 138 books. Yeah, that was a big transition. I have a little bird watching me, making me self-conscious. I wish I could easily just turn it around to show you, but I can't, so. J is for Just Finished, and that is Arundhati Roy's Pulitzer Prize long-listed novel, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness, which I loved, and I posted a review, my very first. I have a long way to go before I can do a video review, but there it is. It's online. I'll put a link to that. 11. K is for Kinds of Books You Won't Read. Basically, the short answer is, after experimenting for the last couple of years with various genres that I had poo-pooed and been snobbish about, up to then in my reading life, I have reverted back to being a snob, hopefully a woke snob, open-minded snob, but still, literary fiction is all I want to read. I'm not interested in YA or mystery or historical fiction. It seems like there's a genre called historical fiction, which is distinguishable from literary fiction, and I'm not interested in that, but I like novels that are historical, that are literary, like Hilary Mantel, but anything that you would call genre, I'm not interested in, but lots of people call literary fiction a genre. I just say they're the only books worth reading. Whew. L is for the longest book you've read. I guess it would be the Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy. It's a multi-volume book, but I read it in one volume, and it was almost 1,100 pages. I love that novel from about 100 years ago, I think, 1920s. 13, M is for major book hangover, because I don't relate to a book hangover at all. For me, it's kind of like my parents. I know so many people, when their dog dies, especially in Japan, when their dog dies, they never get another dog because they're so heartbroken. My parents they're heartbroken, but they always get a new puppy within 10 days. Just again, a few months ago. I'm like them with books. I don't get book hangovers. I close a book, within minutes, I pull the next book off the shelf and start to read. So I don't understand that. 14, N is for number of bookcases you own. I only got 3 short ones, the little IKEA ones. Well, I think I just got pooped on. As long as they didn't poop on my books, the birds. Shit, literally. I've just got 3 little ones, and the rest of my books are piled up all over my apartment. So when I move into my new apartment with my fiance next spring, I'm going to have a room that's full of bookshelves. I can't believe a bird just pooped on me when I'm making a YouTube video. How is this like my life? O is for one book you've read multiple times. That would be, I think, the one I've read the most number of times would be Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I read it for the 3rd time this summer to prepare for reading Fiona Melrose's 2nd novel, Johannesburg. I've mentioned that before. I think Mrs. Dalloway is a book that says different things to you, or at least to me, at different stages of my life. So I loved it the first time I read it, but most of it went over my head, and a lot more didn't go over my head this time. P is for preferred place to read, anywhere, everywhere. 17, Q is for a quote that inspired you from a book that you've read. I found the quote first and then I read the book, so it's kind of ass backwards, but here goes. This is a quote by Bohumil Hrabal, a Czech writer, and here it is. It's not really inspiring, I just think it's beautiful. It captures those moments that burst open for me as a reader. Because when I read, I don't really read. I pop a beautiful sentence into my mouth and suck it like a fruit drop. Or I sip it like a liqueur until the thought dissolves in me like alcohol. So I love that quote so much, especially the sucking a beautiful sentence like a fruit drop. Yeah. Then I read the book and I didn't like it. I don't know if it was the translation or it was just because I don't connect with most continental European fiction, modern continental European fiction. Didn't like the book. I love that quote. I can't believe how noisy it is. I'll have to see how the audio is. I might have to... Here comes the wind. R is for, this is number 18. R is for reading regret. It's not really reading, but it's related to reading. I read Boris Pasternak's famous novel, Dr. Zhivago, when I was living in the UK for 3 months. I spent 3 months doing a work exchange thing when I was 22, and I read Dr. Zhivago, and I loved it. I read my grandparents' paperback copy, and I had a chance. I was going to spend a night or 2 in Oxford with a friend of my aunt's, and this friend was friends with 3 elderly ladies who happened to be Boris Pasternak's nieces, and I was going to get to have tea with Boris Pasternak's nieces, but they were sick the weekend I was there. They weren't well enough to meet me, so there's a regret, hey? S is for a series that you started that you need to finish, and all of the books are out right now. I don't relate to that at all. Series, schmearies. T is for 3 of your all-time favorite books. I'm going to mention 3 favorites that I haven't talked about previously, so they're not my top 3, but they're within the top 10. One of them is Haruki Murakami's The Wind-Up Bird Chronicles. Another one is Michael Cunningham's early novel, A Home at the End of the World, which spoke to me deeply as a young gay man. And 3 is Kate Atkinson's Life After Life. And U is unapologetic fangirl for. I changed it from fanboy to fangirl. And my guilty pleasure is I love reading biographies of the British royal family, especially from the Victorian era to about the down to her grandson. Especially, I've read so many books about Queen Victoria and her kids. I'm not much of a monarchist. It's not that I could care less, but it's not about that. As a Canadian, I don't really care if you don't like having a monarchy, or you do. Like, it's not about that. And I find most monarchists really quite insufferable. But it's almost like a private mythology for me, as I grew up as a dweeby little bookworm, and I read a 900-page biography of Queen Victoria when I was like 12. So, and it's I still carry a torch for the royals. 22. V is for very excited for this release. Just in about 2 weeks, I think, Alan Hollinghurst's new novel, The Sparsholt Affair, comes out. I haven't even gotten to his second last novel, the one that's kind of historical. I heard it wasn't very good. I've got a copy. I haven't read it, but his one that won the Booker, I loved, and the name is gone. So 3. W is for worst bookish habit. First, let me tell you about my best bookish habit, and that is I bail, or DNF, on a lot of books. 2016 I bailed on 30 books, and I'm already up to about 80 books in 2017. So I have pronounced myself, I have anointed myself the Queen of Bailing, and I think it's my best habit, because maybe I'll do a video about bailing another day. The other side of the coin is, my worst habit is that I don't revisit, I don't pick up a book that I've had previously bailed upon and try again. And so I'm going to do that more next year. At least 3 times I'm going to pick up at least 3 books that I bailed on before and see if it was just a matter of the right book at the wrong time, because sometimes that happens, right? So that's what I'm going to do. 24 is X, for X marks the spot. So for this one, you have to go to one of your shelves, start counting at the top left of the bookshelf, and pick the 27th book to talk about. I got this one. African History, A Very Short Introduction, by John Parker and Richard Rathbone. This is that Oxford University Press very short introduction series. At the beginning of this year, I believe it was, I read several of these because they're cheap, and I don't read much nonfiction, and shorter nonfiction works better for me than longer. I usually find with a nonfiction book, it's like, I just need a magazine article's length of this story. I don't want any more. But this series is crap. This is the only book out of the series, so I was lucky that this was the one on the shelf. This is the only one I've read that was really good. The other ones, it was just like some old doddering professor had his secretary type up his lecture notes and put in a few pictures, like that they weren't shaped, not well written. But this one was both of those things in spades. And I learned so much from it, and it's informed the fiction that I've read from Africa a great deal. I forgot to show you, actually, when I said one of my favorite books was The Wind-Up Chronicle. Look at this. I found this in a used bookstore in Tokyo for $10, and this is a first edition, which are selling on the internet for more than $100. I don't plan to sell it unless I get broke, but so for now I treasure it. This is not the copy I read. I read one in Canada, paperback. Number 25. Y is for your latest book purchase. This I blame on Matthew Sharapa. He reviewed this book the other day on his channel. Elmet by Fiona Mosley. And it's a beautiful book. And so I didn't want to just do it on ebook or audio, but I might pair this with the audio because he said the audio is very good. And this is, of course, on the Booker shortlist. I've heard very mixed reviews, but his was very enthusiastic, so I'm going to give it a try. Last one. Z is for Z Snatcher. I guess the Americans would say Z is for Z Snatcher, or the last book that kept you up way late. No book has ever kept me up way late since I was in my 20s. I don't read late at night, so if we're talking about unputdownable, I would say 2 of the books that I'm reading right now, my absolute darling and Chintu. I hope I pronounced it correctly when I went through the list of what I'm reading, because it's spelled Kintu, and I knew before I started reading that it was Chintu, but I still make a slip. But anyway, Chintu by Jennifer Nansubuga Makumbi. Both of those I'm finding on Putdownable at the moment. And that is the list. So that was fun. The only person I'm going to specifically tag is Curtis of Curtis Books and Films, because as payback for him tagging me the other day. And I invite anybody else who's watching this, who's interested in this tag, to please do it. And if you want to say I tagged you, please say I tagged you. Anyway, thank you for watching, and have a great day. Or something. Bye.